gets a 2 or 3 page handout that you can access here at camptech.ca/web-content. I'll flash this slide up again at the end, but you may want to navigate your way over there to get the handout. I will say, if you see anything that's really compelling, either jot it down with a note, a paper, a pen, the old-fashioned way, or take a screenshot, take a picture of your screen, whatever, so that you don't miss anything. You won't get a recording, you won't get the slides, so you've got me for 90 minutes, and that is it. Okay. Today we're going to cover kind of 3 key areas. Getting ready to write, so the things you need to know and have organized and ready to go in order to write well. We'll talk about the copywriting process and how I, as a copywriter, write content for websites. And then I'm going to give you, I think there's 10 or so really good tips on how to write the content itself. Plus, we'll be talking about blogging and SEO and the kinds of things you need to know about your blog, your resources, whatever your dynamic content section is, and your SEO, your search engine optimization. All the stuff you need to know about that to ensure your content is truly killer. So again, my name is Christy Guthrie. I've been working in digital marketing for about 12 years now. I've been working in content marketing for about 6 or 7 years. So I'm a writer, and I run a small but mighty content marketing agency here in Kitchener. And so we do half of the work I do is content marketing. So websites, blog posts, social media, creating guides and downloads, writing awesome emails, those kinds of things. And the other half of the work I do is writing e-learning, so writing bespoke training content for all types of companies, their internal staff training content. So I believe I am uniquely positioned to talk to you tonight about how to really nail your web content. So if you're someone who has a website that you're embarrassed about, you have a website that looks great, but it doesn't seem to be working, it doesn't seem to be converting clients, or you're just getting started and you want to create a website, but you aren't sure what you should write in there, or if you should hire someone to write it, we're going to talk about all those things. You're in the right spot. Pun intended. Actually, not intended, but appreciated. So, the very first thing that you will need to know is who your audience is. And if you've been in any of the many workshops I teach for Digital Main Street, you know that I start every single workshop off with a similar message, because you just literally can't do a good job if you don't know who you're writing for. It's so important. So your website is going to inherently have a broader audience perhaps than your Twitter account, let's say. But it's so critical that you have an intimate understanding of who your audience is, whether that's by sector, whether that's or by service that you offer, by product that you sell, whether that's whether that's the entire company or brand serves one type of audience. You may have a single target audience, you may have 6 target audiences. The sentiment remains the same, that you really have to know who they are in order to write great copy. Because as you know, as we all know, there's millions of websites, billions of websites probably on the internet, and the only way in which you can make sure your website not only gets found, but gets read, and gets read in such a way that it compels a person to act, that actually turns a visitor into a customer, it's a mixture of things, right? It's great navigation, it's easy to use, it looks professional, it looks great, it's attractive, it's easy to navigate, and then the content, right? The content is such that it speaks directly and with relevance to that individual and their priorities and pain points. So you got to know who you're writing for, what are their priorities, and what are their pain points, what do they value. Again, because we're writing a business website and not just a blog, we really want to move people through a purchase funnel. We want to make sure that, one, they find us, and then when they find us, we give them those breadcrumbs to go from whether it's, oh, what is this? I've never heard of it, to, oh, that's interesting, I really need that, to, oh, how much does it cost? How long would it take? Do they deliver? To, I'm going to purchase. Whether that purchase happens online or offline, they're still moving through probably a good portion of that purchase funnel online. So we got to know this stuff. So specific to your website, I would also think about making sure you have the answers to these questions. So once you're thinking about your target audiences, how much do they already know about whether it's your brand, your product, your service, or the industry that you're in? So if you're selling pools, if you're a pool installer, how much does your audience already know about pools? If they've never had a pool, maybe they don't know very much. If it's a product where they're a repeat purchaser and they know a lot about it, and maybe they're buying a gaming PC and you sell gaming PC boards, then your customer probably knows a lot about the product or service you offer. So it's important to know that so we can understand what kind of copy we want to be writing. It's also important to know how much do they need to know to buy, right? That's that idea of how much do they need to know in order to make a purchase? How much do they already know? How much do they need to know? And what is the typical purchase process for this type of product, service, or offering? What part of that purchase process will continue to be offline, like you're selling ERP software implementations, and a good portion of that is going to be a salesperson walking them through the process? And how much of that purchase process is going to be online? So you run an e-commerce hair accessory store, and the entire purchase process is going to happen online. Really map that out to think of where will this website, where will this copy run in that purchase process for this buyer? And maybe it's different, right? Maybe if I run a bakery, some people are going to do everything online. So maybe one of your audiences is going to find you through Google, browse your online gallery, and place an order online. Where another, maybe that same person's mom is going to find your website on Google and call you and want someone to talk through the options over the phone, right? So that's why the who matters, is making sure you understand who is going to be using your website through the purchase process. I hope that makes sense. That got a bit long. You also want to know what's their opinion of you, your product, your service, offering, or the industry. Are they really skeptical, or are they totally bought in and excited? Have they bought something before and it was a total disaster, and so this time they're dotting their I's and crossing their T's and looking for a lot of detailed information? Or is this just a fun purchase that they're there to get inspired and then maybe buy some lipstick, right? Like, what is their opinion of you, your product, service, your industry? That's going to help inform what kind of content you want to be writing. And lastly, what's their style? So we're going to talk about what's your style as a brand, but it's also important to stop and think about what's their style. And part of that is going to be into these next slides. So the question I hear all the time is, how do I find this information? And it's going to be a mixture of different things. I would recommend everyone does 10 interviews, phone interviews, in-person interviews, Zoom calls with someone in your target audience. Maybe those are existing customers, past customers, friends and family of your friends and family who fit within your target audience group, and just ask them a lot of those questions. You also want to get this information. So this is the information that we aren't necessarily talking about if you've been on the social media workshop where we're talking about getting to know your audience. But what we always talk about is gathering together all the information you know about your audience and putting it into a persona. So actually putting that information to work. This is a HubSpot free download. It's not in the worksheet, so sorry. But if you Google HubSpot, HUBSPOT, buyer persona template, you will get the slides that you're looking at now. I've filled in this information on the right, but you will get these slides if you wanted to fill out a persona like this in this format. There's tons of different formats you could use, but essentially a buyer persona is having a paper record, or a digital record in this case, of who that audience is. And the best practice is to give them a name so that you're not talking about, 25 to 40-year-old women. You're talking about stay-at-home Sydney in this example, right? So you give them a name so that when you're talking, when you're writing for this audience, you're writing to an individual because you want it to feel like they're having an individual personalized experience, not like you're talking to a whole pile of people and they just happen to be there. So a persona is you're taking the characteristics and what you know about that representative group, and you're putting it into one document and calling her Sydney, and then and having a record so that any writer, designer, salesperson, anyone who's going to touch this sales process, online or offline, knows who you're selling to, who you're talking to. So some of the things that you want to know, in addition to what we just talked about, because those things aren't necessarily on this slide, is their background. So what do they do for work? What's their career path look like? What's their family look like? So stay-at-home Sydney is a stay-at-home mom. She's married with 2 kids, young kids you can see, and she had a career in nursing before she decided to stay home. Again, this is representative of that group of women who are your target audience. The demographics for stay-at-home Sydney is female, somewhere 25 to 40, single household income, suburban. Identifiers. So, what's Sydney like? She's calm, friendly, chatty. She's actively building community. She's looking for new ideas, inspiration, and information. And she's digitally savvy. Again, so this is like an amalgamation of typical things that your target audience is. The second page is, what are her goals? What are Sydney's goals? Okay, again, this is not even talking about your store, but this is just talking about Sydney. Well, her priorities are creating a fun, vibrant household for her family. She's always looking to introduce safe, new experiences for her kids. She's one of her goals is making friends, making her friends and family feel well loved. She's always trying to maintain her own health and wellness in her giving role. She feels like she's giving, and one of her goals is to make sure that she doesn't lose herself in that. Some of the challenges Sydney finds herself in is living on a moderate but not an infinite budget. Okay, so they've got a single household income, and that income isn't small, but it's also not infinite, with only one of them at work now. One of her challenges is finding time to do everything she wants to. She's got so many ideas, and she just never seems to have enough time to get everything done. That's because she has this never-ending to-do list. And as part of that never getting everything done, it's like finding time to prioritize herself is an ongoing challenge. Also, COVID, not even specific, the idea of connecting with others outside of the home because there's so much going on is often a challenge for her. Okay, so all of that is about Sydney. So you can start to see that if you know your audience at this kind of level, then you're in a position to write content that really connects and intersects with what it is that they care about. We're starting at number 7, we're starting to talk about your store. The store in this example is a gift shop, a cute little Main Street gift shop that sells cards and puzzles and home products from France. They've got all sorts of odds and sods and creative projects, cross-stitch packages and little succulent plants, all sorts of fun stuff, okay? So then we get to number 7 in this persona, and we say, what can we do as a brand, as a business, to help our persona achieve their goals? What can we do as a business to help our persona overcome their challenges? So this is where you really want to stop and think of, like, where is the value that you're adding to your audience? So as a brand, as a company, this little gift shop, we can share ideas, inspiration, information, and offers that help her achieve those goals. We can make her feel like part of our community, and we can offer we offer family and adult focused products. So there's stuff for her and stuff for her family and friends. 8 and 9. Okay, so 8 are real quotes. So again, maybe these are collected through an interview or a survey. Maybe they're collected at the store. You see a representative from Sydney's target audience group walk in, and you're having a quick conversation. These are the kinds of things you want to put down on paper. So Sydney's likely to say, I don't want to buy everything at Amazon. It's just so easy. Or, I love my kids so much, and I'm always looking for new games and activities to play with them. Maybe she said, being at home has been such a big adjustment. Or, I wish I felt more connected to my community. Or, I'm willing to spend more to get unique, safe, high-quality products. Again, so as you're building these personas, ideally you've heard someone say this, but they could also kind of be aggregate quotes. But really what you're trying to do is have a panel of this persona that really speaks to getting inside Sydney's head. And then it's not lastly. The next one, 9, is common objections. Why wouldn't someone in this target audience, why wouldn't Sydney buy? Why wouldn't she shop at your store? Well, she doesn't have time to get downtown to shop in person, or she doesn't realize that you have such a wide selection of products. She thought it was just a card shop. She didn't realize all these other stuff existed there. Marketing messages. Okay, these are the last ones. So then it's like thinking about your marketing messaging. So how would you describe your solution to Sydney? Well, so this shop might say, the gift shop reinvented. Unique gifts, games, and home goods designed to inspire and educate families of all shapes and sizes. And then your elevator pitch of just a bit longer. We're a community of crafters, teachers, and creatives offering ideas, inspiration, and moments of happiness to families of all shapes and sizes. Our carefully curated selection of games, toys, gifts, and home goods are sustainably sourced, affordable, and unique. So you can see if this is all on one page before you head into copywriting. You know exactly who you're speaking to. Now, you may be serving more than just stay-at-home Sydney, right? You may have a bunch of different, obviously there's more than just stay-at-home moms who are shopping at this gift shop. So you would have more than one persona. I would say between 3 and 5 personas. One, if you have like a really specific business, you could have 1, but up to 5, any more than 5. And I think it's going to start to get confusing. I would focus on the 80%, where you're getting 80% of your business. If that all comes from one persona, focus on that one persona, or 2 or 3. If you're in B2B, you're thinking about, it's virtually the same stuff, except some of it is these same ideas. What are their goals, challenges? What can you do? And some of the answers to those will be personal, like at home, and some of them will be professional. So if this was a B2B buyer, that person's goals would be in their role, but there might also be, like professional goals. So if this person is in a role where they're likely to turn over within 16 months because one of their goals is to make it to the next level, this is a stepping stone kind of role, you might put that there. Or their challenges might be more focused on their business activities. So their challenges would be aligning resources at work, or getting the ear of the CEO, or fighting through like the company culture, which doesn't like change. Those are the kinds of challenges, but you would still have challenges, the same categories. Okay, so focusing on who your audience is literally the best investment you can make. Because you can write beautiful, beautiful prose, beautiful copy, compelling copy, laugh out loud, funny copy, and if it doesn't connect directly and with relevance to your target audience, they'll never enjoy it, they'll never see it, they'll never like it, it won't compel them to purchase. So really understanding who they are so you can tailor it accordingly. I've used this example before, but if there are some really good horror movies out there, I've heard, beautiful, like awesome scripts, amazing FX, wonderful directors, incredible acting, and I will never watch them. I'll never watch them. So if that person was trying to reach me, a horror movie would never be the right way. So you want to make sure your web copy is not a horror movie, unless you're reaching. I'm going to stop. You get what I'm saying. That metaphor is going nowhere quick. Okay, so once you know who your audience is, you're going to switch over to thinking about what is your brand voice, and do you have that well established? And again, some of you in this workshop will be like, well, this will be well established. You'll have a brand style guide, and you have this well thought out, and it's well practiced across all of your different digital and in real life touch points. And some of you won't have thought about this ever, and this is going to be valuable to both of you, I promise. So voice and tone is this idea of like, what does it look, sound, and feel like to interact with you online, your brand, your story, your personality. What combination of language, style, and inclusions are you using to connect with your audience? These are the building blocks of voice and tone. You want to make sure that if somebody interacts with you on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on your website, and then meets you in person at the store or on a sales call, that it feels like it's all coming from the same place, that it feels like you're all part of one incredibly synchronous and compelling brand. And the big secret behind that is that your brand voice, especially with small business, it isn't created, it's captured. So it's this idea that your brand voice at its most healthy and most authentic is a capturing of who you are in real life, as opposed to putting on a mask or on a persona when you're going onto the internet, right? You really want that authenticity that people are really craving from brands. So think about this less as like, who can we reinvent our brand to be, and more about how can we package up all of what makes us amazing and make sure that is uniform across all of our digital touch points. So the way I do this is with archetypes. So this is rooted in Carl Jung's archetypes, behavioral archetypes, and he was a psychologist who invented the idea of archetypes, which are behavior patterns that we find ourselves walking in. So I'm sure Carl Jung is rolling over in his grave when I'm going to call it like a personality test, but it's kind of that. It's kind of like the Enneagram, and it's kind of like the Myers-Briggs, and it's this idea that we can put an archetype. We can categorize our brand voice with an archetype that gives us some boundaries, it gives us borders, it helps to give our voice and tone some shape. So this version of the 12 archetypes is from Culture Talk. So Culture Talk is it's an archetypal platform. They do the testing. They have brand consultants. I'm a Culture Talk brand consultant. And so what we do through Culture Talk is you would fill out like a survey. The survey would talk about what your archetypes are as an individual or as an organization, and then it assigns you between 1 and 3 archetypes, and then based on those archetypes, you're able to make a bunch of decisions about your branding. You don't have to do the quiz to start to get an idea for what your brand archetype is. So if you go to culturetalk.com, there's a page for each of these 12 archetypes, and you can just start to read about what the archetypes are and see where you feel your brand slots in best. So, but let me tell you a bit more. So there are 12 brand archetypes, from the innocent to the hero to the revolutionary, the creator, the lover, and the jester. There's 12 of them. And none of these are better or worse. There's no silver bullet that like creator brands are better and more successful than ruler brands. None of that It's the idea that different brands have different personalities, and if those personalities can be, brought to life and packaged up in uniform across touch points, it can create really compelling user experiences. So for all my Harry Potter fans, you can see this. These are the Harry Potter archetypes. For my Game of Thrones fans, these are the Game of Thrones cast as archetypes. Old school. Do we have any Lost fans on the call? Jack or Sawyer? These are the Lost, if you remember the show Lost. These are the show Lost archetypes. So it's the idea that, is your brand Rachel, or is your brand Monica, or is your brand Phoebe? And if you're a Phoebe brand and you started talking like Monica all of a sudden, it would create a real disconnect. Or if you're a Phoebe brand, yet some of your salespeople were like Monica and Chandler and Ross. This is a Friends metaphor, if anyone's not following. And so every time you connected with your brand, it felt like you were talking to a different friend. That might create some real tension or a disconnect between you and your audience. So what you want to do is figure out who you are as a brand archetype, and then I'll show you can start to make some decisions around that. So if we take a closer look, an innocent brand, this is one of the 12 archetypes, is guided by core values, is all about getting back to basics, trusts in an ultimate kind of good, is about wholesomeness, finding happiness through simple pleasures, believes in possibilities, believes that life doesn't have to be so hard, and is really, integrity is really important to them. So an example of one of these brands is Burt's Bees. So you can start to see how some of these traits, back to basics, believing in ultimate goodness, simple pleasures, possibilities, this really kind of innocent connection with the earth is embedded, is inherent in their packaging and their ads and their social media and their website content. If we look at an Explorer brand, so think curious, open, freedom, strong sense of self, hands-on, authenticity, uniqueness, diversity, really being ahead of their time, able to respond quickly, independent, self-directed journey brands. Does anyone throw in the chat if you can think of any Explorer brands? Can you think of any brands that might be an Explorer? Toss them in the chat and I will. REI, MEC, Tesla, Apple, GoPro, Patagonia. Yeah. Okay. Yes, you guys. 100%. Jeep, Coleman. So good. So Starbucks is one. NASA, Boy Scouts, Patagonia, National Geographic, all Explorer brands. One more for the fun of it. Ruler. So gains and maintains power, systems of policies and procedures, enjoys leadership roles, concerned with image, status, prestige, commanding, authoritative, politically savvy, patriotic. So again, sound off in the chat. Who does that sound like? Amazon, the government, yeah, a bank, Tesla, Ford, CNN, IBM. So Budweiser is the best one because they literally have a crown there. Also, Mercedes-Benz, the U.S. Army. Those are typical, politics in Walmart. Yes, funny and true. So these are ruler brands. So again, if you go to culturetalk.com, you can poke around without taking the test, and start to read the words around each brand and start to think about where your brand fits in. And it's okay if your brand might cross multiple archetypes, like 2 or even 3. Any more than that, that's too many. But think and use that as we don't have this isn't a branding workshop, so we don't have a ton of time to dive into this, but you would use that as a starting point for what colors do we use, what images do we use, even what platforms are we on. Ultimately, for our creating killer web copy context, we're using these archetypes to help us know what words are we using, how do we want someone to feel? Do we want them to feel held? Do we want them to feel inspired? Do we want them to feel, how do we want them to feel? Okay, so you know who your audience is. You've taken a good look at what your brand voice is, and then you're going to create a style guide. So use that understanding to start to codify, your voice. So that's going to be your voice and tone. I'm going to show you an example in the next slide. And also, you can use that understanding to start to build out standards for grammar and mechanics. So, do you use abbreviations and acronyms? How are you using contractions? What is your capitalization? Are you using emojis or not emojis? Is that totally inappropriate? Using emojis is totally inappropriate if you're the Mayo Clinic. Probably if you're Harvard Law or something. But if you're a thrift store in Kitchener, using emojis, again, it might be totally appropriate. It would be inappropriate not to use them. So grammar mechanics is that's, unless you're a writer, maybe that feels like the boring part, but that's the stuff that helps to make sure that your titles on every page are capitalized in the same way, that you're formatting your numbers and dates in the right way, in the same way, and that there's notes on writing for different channels. So a great style guide, which I'm about to show you an example of, starts to codify your voice and tone. How do we use words to communicate our voice and tone? It codifies your grammar mechanics, and it codifies how do we write for different channels. So we're going to use MailChimp as an example. So this is, and I've got in the handout, there's a link to this as a template if you wanted to use it for your brand. At MailChimp, we've walked in our customer's shoes, and we know marketing technology is a minefield of confusing terminology. That's why we speak like the experienced and compassionate business partner we wish we'd had way back when. We treat every hopeful brand seriously. We want to educate people without patronizing or confusing them. Using offbeat humor and a conversational voice, we play with language to bring joy to their work. We prefer the subtle over the noisy, the wry over the farcical. We don't take ourselves too seriously. Whether people know what they need from us or don't know the first thing about marketing, every word we say informs and encourages. We impart our expertise with clarity, empathy, and wit. Okay, so you can see how that page is a confluence of all the stuff we've talked about. They know who they're speaking to. They know what those people are struggling with and what their priorities are, and they know how they're using words, language, to connect the dots and serve those people in a meaningful way. So this is in the MailChimp style guide. All of that means that when we write copy, we are plain spoken. We understand the world our customers are living in, one modeled with hyperbolic language, upsells, and overpromises. We strip all that away and value clarity above all. All of that means when we write copy, we're genuine. We get small business because we were a small business not too long ago. That means we relate to customers' challenges and passions. That means that when we write copy, we're translators. Our experts can make what's difficult look easy, and it's our job to demystify B2B speak and actually educate. And it means when we write copy, our humor is dry, straight-faced, subtle, and a touch eccentric. So again, you can see that this is the perfect mix of who are we serving and how are we using content to connect with them in a meaningful way. Again, not every brand needs to or should be a dry-witted, consultative sales tone, right? Like that's not the point. It's the point that they've taken a think about who they're trying to reach and how they're going to do that. So like their voice, their tone, usually informal, but always more important to be clear than entertaining. When you're writing, consider the reader's state of mind. Are they relieved to be finishing? Are they confused? And seeking help, once you have an idea of their emotional state, you can adjust your tone accordingly. The only difference between voice and tone is that voice is standard and always, and tone may change. Like you say, when you're on Twitter and someone's really looking for help, maybe your wry, sense of humor maybe that's not the time to break it out. Maybe that's saved for when they're not frustrated and seeking tech support. Okay, so again, in the flash that URL again for you before we leave. There is a link to the MailChimp Voice and Style Guide template, which you can use, and I think it's a really good jumping off point if you're going to create a style guide of your own, which I think you should. Okay. So again, we're not talking about what pages does your website need to have. We're not talking about how to create an awesome homepage with like all of that stuff is kind of part of this conversation, but we're not talking about it because we're talking about the copywriting itself. But I would say before you go to put pen to paper in the copywriting process, you want to do what we just talked about. Who's your audience? Really deep understanding of who that stay-at-home Sydney is. Figure out what your archetype is and what does that mean for the creative and style decisions that you're going to make online and offline, but online. Creating a style guide that really codifies your voice and your tone and make sure that everybody who's going to touch this, touch your communications, really knows what it means to speak in your brand's voice. Now we get to the copywriting process itself. So page by page, if we're talking about a website, sorry, I have one question here before we move on. When doing the archetype, is it based on our personality and how we want to be represented, or what our personas are going to connect with the most, or both? So it's your brand personality. The question is it just going from our personality, or is it starting with who our audience wants us to be and trying to fit into that? I think that's the question. And the answer is start with your personality. What are you authentically about? And then what we do with this process is find ways to get your audience to tap into that. Find ways to make that really relatable and engaging for your audience. There's another question about look and feel, style, mood boards. We're not talking about any of that, unfortunately. We're just talking about writing killer copy, and there's already so much stuff. But the idea would be that you are using those archetypes to also inform your style, look and feel, images, colors, logo, all that kind of stuff. You're starting with the goal. Okay. I wish we had 10 hours and we could dive into all of it, but we don't. The first step of the copywriting process is to start with the goal. What is the purpose of the page? Who is it written for? Right, we just talked about that ad nauseum. So when and where will they find it? So is this likely to be a landing page? Is this something that they're linking to from an email? Is it something that it's like a blog post that maybe they'll click through as part of their purchase funnel? Just have a think about when that target audience is likely going to interact with this piece of content, whether it's a sales sheet or it's a web services page. When are they likely to find it? Is the first thing they're going to read? Is it the third thing they're going to read? Again, you can't know exactly, but take a look at your existing analytics, or think about the purchase or the user click path that you're designing, and put that into the step. What do you want them to know, care, and do after reading it? So what's your goal of the page? What, after reading this page, what would you like that target audience, that stay-at-home Sydney, to know, to care about, and to do after reading it? Then, still on that same page, brainstorm. Brainstorm benefits. So try to think of 10 to 20 benefits specific to stay-at-home Sydney about that page topic. So let's call it a services page. Who are you speaking to? Where are they now? Where do they want to be? What's standing in their way? What problem are you solving? What have past customers said about this service? What are the details or features of your offer? How would they get it? What questions would your readers have about this service or product? Just literally brainstorm 10 to 20 things. Brainstorm as many of these things onto one page about that service. Don't think about how to write the perfect page yet. Just literally, we're on, let's say we are a bakery. Apparently I didn't have dessert tonight. We are a bakery and we sell custom occasion cakes. And this specific page is custom occasion cakes, okay? So what are the 10 to 20 benefits of our custom occasion cakes? How is it going to change your life? Why? What have customers said about it in the past? What are the specific details or features? What are the questions that you know your custom cake buyer is going to ask? How would they actually purchase it? Do you deliver? What's the timelines? What are the ingredients? What's special about your custom occasion cakes? Really just everything you can think about those custom occasion cakes, get onto a page. Then you're going to frame it up. Then you're going to step back and say, okay, if that's all the stuff that we could talk about, what do we need to talk about in order to reach this page's goal? Okay, and so you start with an outline. So again, frame it up to say, I want to define. Occasion cakes was not a great, and was not an easy example for me here. So maybe it's not occasion cakes, just to make this easier for me. Sorry. Maybe you are maybe you're selling business consulting. I've done a lot of that, so I can speak to that quite easily. Okay, so the first thing on this business consulting page is a service, and it's one-on-one. Grow your business consulting. So you've brainstormed a whole pile of things that you know your target audience needs to know, wants to know, is going to have questions about. You've listed all the benefits of your service. You've listed all of the scope of your service, and how engaging with you works on a brainstorm page. Now you're going to outline it. So what do they need to know, and in what order? Maybe it's a definition first, right? Maybe it's that whole idea of starting with why, and really getting them bought into the benefits. Go through your files and look for ways in which you have already, maybe it's your emails or your PowerPoints, or look in all of the ways that you've already figured this out. You've already learned to communicate this in an effective way. Consult your page design. If you're writing to a website page design, look at it and see how much space you have and which of these messages would fit most appropriately within those spaces. So you start to frame it up. You start to put some shape to that brainstorm list, knowing that not everything is going to fit. Then you're going to write it. You're like, oh, thanks. This is what I came here for. I promise I have some copywriting tips in just a sec. So we're not going to talk much about it right now because I've got 30 other slides for it. But then you're actually going to write it. You're going to go from brainstorm list to outline to actually writing it out. Then you're going to step away. Step away and then come back. Okay? Write it and then leave, whether for an hour or for overnight. Put some space between you and the copy before you do one last review. When you're doing your last review, consider your headers and your formatting. Like, again, remember, this might be perfect copy that you've read in a Word doc, but once it's online, once it's in your website, or especially on a mobile phone, maybe it's too heavy. Maybe there's too many lines per paragraph. You're going to need to break that up. Maybe you need to add some headers or some bullets. Maybe you need to talk to your page designer and get some call-out boxes or some separators between the text. And as per Kurt Vonnegut, he's smarter than I, every sentence should serve a purpose. So I see this a lot, especially with consultants, is there's so many big words, there's so many ideas, and there's so many things that they want to get down and distill. So it's thinking about, is that needed right now? Do all of these words add up to something valuable? That's what this final step of editing should be about, is less about the actual words and more about the overall impression and valuableness of the copy itself. So that's the process, okay? I know we didn't talk about the details there, but it's start with a goal. Brainstorm as much stuff as you can. Go from that big brainstorm list to a frame of what the page should include. Write it down. Then step back and then come back and ruthlessly edit, asking, is every sentence needed? Does this look good on the internet? And sometimes there's Sometimes the formatting needs to take precedence over the Pulitzer Prize winning content, and sometimes the content the page needs to the page design needs to respond to the Pulitzer Prize winning content, and it's going to be a judgment call on your behalf. Okay, but how, I hear you saying, how do I make it awesome? How do I, on step 4, write great stuff? Let me tell you. Okay. The first thing I would say is write how you talk, especially because I know you've done some work on your brand voice by now. Really focus, spend way less time about sounding professional, spend way less time worrying about writing, and literally write how you talk. Because most of the time, unless you're a pharmaceutical company, what people want is like a real person, people don't deal with brands, people don't buy, this is the saying, people don't buy from brands, people buy from people. And so you want your brand to have a real personableness, even if you're a professional service, or you're a more formal brand. That doesn't mean that people want to talk to a textbook. So even if you're a law firm, or you're a health clinic, or you're a tutoring company, or you're an executive recruiter, or you're a whatever, insert more formal brand here, people still want to be able to understand what you're saying. People still want to be able to read quickly. People still want to have that kind of heart-to-heart connection with your brand. So write how you talk. Don't be so worried about sounding professional. Use language your customers use. So show that you get them. So I had a law firm client, and they... the idea was that getting divorced is easy, but getting separated, the actual act of separating your assets, is where it's difficult. Which is true. Of course it's true, and they knew that, and they have a full lifetime of experience in that space. And yet, everybody who wants a divorce calls it a divorce, and they're not thinking that it's a 2-step process, that separation and divorce are different things. They're saying, I want to leave my partner, and I want to make sure that the way we split our things is fair, and I call that a divorce. And so I tell you that story because sometimes you're using words that your customers use, and then you're teaching them what the actual words are, or what the actual terms are, or what the more true definition or words are. But you're using the words that you know they're using, or you're using the words you know that they're searching, because you're meeting them where they are. It also shows that you get them, right? So this idea that you get them. And ideally, that also means that you're losing industry buzzwords and explaining things in plain language. So in the chat, let me know your biggest pet peeve buzzwords that you never want to read on a website again. Can you think of any? Ideation, synergy, all natural, granular, pivot, oh, so good. Unprecedented, yes. I can't wait until we don't talk. Curated, revolutionized, bespoke, out of the box. Acronyms. Elevate, elevated, best in class, new and improved, innovative, woke, transformative, holistic, right? Okay, so there's so many. So again, I think collaborative. I think what happens is when we start copywriting, we're trying to distill all of our big ideas down into a few sentences. And so what we do is we start to lose how we would talk in real life. We would lose how we would have a conversation, and we just try to distill until we're saying that our synergistic strategies are best in class, holistic plans for, like, that's what the website ends up saying. So be really, really cautious of that. Emphasize benefits over features. So people don't care about your company. They only care about how your company can help resolve their problems. So of course there's an asterisk there, because more and more people do care about the company. But it's this idea that, like, So in my line of work as a writer, as a content marketer, I've never met a client who wants a blog post, and I've never met a client's customer who wants to read a blog post. I've never met a person, I bet there's not a single human on this meeting that wants another e-newsletter, right? Nobody wants that. But what we do want is information. We want inspiration. We want offers and recipes and curated lists sent directly to our inbox, right? And this is famously, Apple changed the world because they stopped talking about bits and bytes and started talking about their why and about what it meant to be an Apple person. And now I'll never not buy an Apple product, no matter how good these Galaxy phones apparently are, because I don't buy those. And that's because they focus on benefits over features. So really think about that. And that's not just with the feeds and speeds of a product, but with your services, your offer, any of it. Really, why do they care? What is in it for them? And this is where that kind of step 5, stepping back and revisiting your content really comes into play. Because sometimes it can be really hard, especially if we've been living in this space for 30 years. We've been doing this our whole lives. Sometimes we get a bit of a skewed perspective of what a beginner or a brand new or a customer who's never heard of any of these words or any of these things really knows or cares about. So that kind of step away and then come back and then looking at every sentence, this is one thing I would have on that checklist. Am I talking about features or am I talking about benefits? Balance sales and education. No one wants to be sold to. So think about your website and your web copy more as teaching copy than as selling copy. So again, this is going to be different, like slightly different depending on who you are and what you're selling and to whom you're selling. But it's this idea that, Web 1.0 websites were very much billboards, right? They were digital billboards. And now, are we Web 4.0 now? The idea is that you're building an educational resource that a potential customer can come to and can click around and look and read and watch and review and understand and download and use content to check off all of their decision-making criteria so that they're ready to buy, right? That teaching, information, education equals engagement equals conversion. Again, this is different if you're selling cookies than if you're selling business consulting because the purchase path is different, but it's still the same idea. It's just some it may be more important and some it may be yes, you know what I mean. No matter what you're doing, you're teaching, informing, and educating. That's what leads to engagement. That's what leads to conversion. And don't forget your why and all of that, right? So when we're talking about sales copy, really making sure that you're tethering your that purchase to your why, to why you exist, to something more than just making money is a great way. Is I would say one of the only ways to get people to get that balance of sales and education correct. I hope that makes sense. Tip number 5 is prove it. Okay, so again, anywhere you can, think about including reasons to believe or RTBs. So do you have RTBs to back up your claim? So when you talk about being KW's best florist, how do I know that that's true? Do you have a reason to believe? Do you have a record, platinum award? Do you have a quote? Do you have data? Do you have something that backs that up? Or if you're talking about that your vegan meal delivery food is really healthy, what kind of stats, quotes, or data can you use to really increase your authority and help your reader believe what you're saying? Omni trium perfectum. How's my Latin? This is the idea of the power of 3, right? So 3-part structure, tricolon, Hendrick. I never use these actual words, but it's the idea that the power of 3 comes up a lot. It's going to come up in your web design. It's going to come up in how you structure narrative. So like a 3-part structure, a beginning, a setup, anticipation, and a conclusion. It's also going to come up like at a sentence level. Like think about the Gettysburg Address. We cannot desecrate. We cannot consecrate. We cannot hallow this ground. 3, right? Or, this is an American source, obviously, life, love, and the pursuit of happiness. Having 3, that's the tricolon one, having 3 memorable, rhythmic parts to your phrases makes great writing and great reading. And then the third one here is this idea of Veni, Vidi, Vici, I came, I saw, I conquered, friends, Romans, countrymen, having 3 parts to your sentences also, again, is good writing and good reading. So as you are setting out in your copywriting and you're describing features, or you're talking about how things work, talking about your benefits, try to structure them in 3s if you can. Copy tip number 7. Read it out loud. This is my favorite one. The best way to know if your copywriting is clunky, boring, or plain old bad is to hear it read aloud. So, once you have, again, in that step 5, you've written it out, you come back, read it out. Don't just read it out loud, like say it, and listen to how it sounds. Does it sound good? Are you excited? Does this sound like a challenger brand? Does this sound like a jester brand? Is it like laugh out loud funny? It doesn't have that good rhythm. Can you breathe? And if you can't breathe, you need to go back and add some punctuation. Are you bored? Are you bored? And is the meaning clear? Are you lost in a list of synchronistic ABC feature for words and buzzwords and acronyms that you don't even know what it like? You've read some resumes that feel like that. You're like, what is this person trying to say? Reading it out loud is one of the best ways to spot if some of those things are at play. Tip number 8, don't try to say it all on one page. So you likely can't effectively summarize all of your expertise and value in one page. You can't. You have a whole, what you do is more than that. And if what you do is simple in its presentation, it's cookies or it's custom cakes, the idea is that you have tons of cakes to look at and tons of options and ideas and inspiration. So even if the idea that you can't summarize a lifetime of business consulting expertise and decision-making criteria into one page, you either can't summarize it all because you have too much to say, or you can't summarize it all because you have too much to show. And either way, just recognize that that's okay, because actually too much distillation means you end up saying nothing of value. So consider how your sitemap, your interlinking strategy, your lead nurture paths, your overall content marketing strategy support your copy. And that is to say that, when you go back and review your content, you realize you have a whole section on, why they need to consider, in-person training versus online learning. There's this whole section that's so important, but maybe it doesn't need to be said right here. Maybe that could be a link to another page, whether that's a blog post or a download or a video or a secondary services page. And then that linking helps somebody through the purchase path without overwhelming them, without making the pages too heavy. So don't try to say it all on one page. Use interlinking and your sitemap and some of these other things to link lots of content pieces together. Okay. Does your website need a blog? And when I say blog, I mean like a page that has dynamic content that isn't just your services. It does. Yes. I'm sorry. Are people happy or sad about that? Tell me in the chat. Are you guys happy or sad about this? Not surprised. Happy. Yay. Yay. Too much work. Sad. Tired. Oh. Okay. I like vlogs. Me too. Nope. Okay. So lots of okay, good. I'm seeing more yays than nays, but it is a lot of work. So. But yes, again, for SEO, and for readability, and for telling a full story, and for building like a true connection between you and your audience, you do kind of need a blog. No, you do need a blog. So it's critical to building trust, authority, and interest. So different businesses will require different content strategies, but all organizations should be publishing dynamic content. So again, that's a whole. This is a perfect example of like an interlink. This would interlink to a whole nother conversation about how to decide what and when and how often for your specific business. But at its core, yes, you should also be writing, in addition to that awesome website content, some more dynamic monthly content. Okay. I'm running a bit short on time, but we're going to keep cracking along, so I really appreciate your attention. So writing starts with who's my audience, what's my brand voice, what are we trying to do, page by page, following that copywriting process. Page by page, you're saying, what am I trying to do? Here are all my ideas, framing that up, writing it down using all of those tips we just talked about, leaving it, and then coming back and ruthlessly editing it for value, for secret buzzwords, for too much distillation, for trying to say too much in one page, and for saying, is this fun to read? Is this in line with my brand archetype? Is this something compelling that would make someone want to buy? And how does it look in my web design? Okay. So once you've done that, and now you've started writing a blog in addition, there's also some considerations for SEO, your search engine optimization, that you want to make sure are part of those website pages to make sure that your content gets found. Because is there anything worse than spending all of that time and all of the talent and all of the resources and writing these really beautiful pages, and then you search on Google for exactly what you offer, exactly what you do, and you don't show up? Ugh, that's the ultimate insult to all of us who are working so hard on our own businesses. So, Libby just reminded me, you guys, I forgot to even say it off the top, and I can't believe I did, because we're doing a giveaway right here, right now. I have 2 copies of this book, See You on the Internet, Building Your Business with Digital Marketing. It's 2 digital copies. So they're downloadable copies. It's written by Avery Schwartz. She is a Toronto-based small business owner. She runs Camp Tech, who is where these workshops are coming from. And 2 people on this call are getting these for free. All you have to do is check the chat now. Libby is giving them away to 2 people. She will tell you who those 2 people randomly are chosen. Congratulations to those of you who won. If you didn't win, maybe think about looking this up on at the library or at a bookstore, because it is an awesome, like if you're into what we're talking about now, that's what this book talks about. 3 people are getting it, Libby says. 3 people are getting that. She's telling you in the chat. Thanks, Libby, for reminding me. We're going to dive into those. I will say one of the biggest SEO boost you're going to get is that dynamic blog content. So not only is it there to make sure that you've got something to say and to tell your story and to give people more information on how to buy and why to buy, but also to boost your SEO. Okay, so in search results, there's these 3 pieces. Your URL, your site title or your page title, every page has a title, and a description, your meta description, okay? So you can set this specifically in the back end of your website. You would set, so it will give you a default with which is likely to the header one, the H1 on your website, but you can update these, and you can write your meta description, and you can update the URL, like the slug of it, the part that comes after your actual domain name, to be as search friendly as possible. So you want to think about what are the words that people are using as they relate to this specific page, and make sure that they are in these 3 things: your URL, your title, and your description. Now, if you're selling business consulting, not every single one of your services page can be called business consulting, because then your pages are competing against each other. So you really want to, all the way with SEO, you want to honor the content that's in the page and not try and game. You're not smarter than Google, and neither am I. So we will never outsmart Google. Google spends, I don't know, lots of time and lots of money making sure that Google is a noun and a verb, and they do so by connecting users' queries with the best possible content. And so you used to be able to game it by just stuffing in keywords and doing these tricks. You could kind of bypass and trick Google into thinking that you're the best, most authoritative resource. But now you actually have to be the best, most authoritative resource. So that's number one. But then two, you don't want to miss these little things that make sure Google knows that. Okay. So URL, site title, meta description. Make sure you've considered those as part of the copywriting process. So when I write website pages for clients, I put this at the top. Page title, meta description, and I write that out at the top, and then the page copy comes next, so that nobody forgets. I don't forget, the client doesn't forget, and the web people don't forget. They need to consider this. On a website page, there's headers. Okay, so when you see content that is bigger and bolder, it's because it's using an H tag, a header tag. And so header tags are used throughout the website. H1 would be your title, H2s would be your subtitles, and H3 would be your sub-subtitles. And the copy that goes in those header tags is our hints to Google that information is really important, that this page is about these words because they're in the headers. So think about your headers, and they do so much heavy lifting. Those headers are so important for the readability of your site, especially if you're on mobile and you're doing a bunch of scrolling. Those readabilities are huge ambassadors for your brand voice and tone, and those headers should have your SEO keywords in them. So take some time to deeply consider what goes in your header tags, okay? Keywords in your body text. Okay, so again, like I alluded to, back in the day, I don't know, like 2000, what you could do is just put in online casino or funny jokes. You could just stuff it in, and it would read terribly, but it would get your site to the top because Google would scan your page and say, oh wow, 80% of that page is about funny jokes. It must be about funny jokes. Now Google's much smarter, so Google's looking for readability, is looking for native synonyms, is looking for authoritative content that answers questions. Like, it's mind-blowing how smart Google is when it can scan your page and know if it's good and authoritative or bad. So you do want to use keywords, but you don't want to stuff keywords. You want to use keywords in the way that it's conversational and natural and normal. So think about keywords and make sure you've done some keyword research to know, again, like that divorce story, what are the words that people are using. It's not called a prenup. It's not called a prenup in Canada. And yet, because we're all watching American TV, we're calling it a prenup. It's called a marriage contract. So the idea when you're writing copy is to be, even though it's a marriage contract, in Canadian law, you might use the word prenup, prenuptial agreement, because those are some keywords that people might be searching. So think about your keywords, do some keyword research, use the words that people will be searching for, but don't stuff keywords in, because you won't actually get a return on that. Internal linking. Okay, again, so Google's crawling your website, and you're using internal linking. We talked about it above, to tell your story by linking keywords from one page to another so that you're not feeling like you have to include everything. Sorry. So you're not feeling like you have to include everything you've ever wanted to say on the top of the one page. You're linking to other pages to tell the full story. As web users, we know how to do that. We know how to use the internet. Google also loves these links because it helps crawl and index your website. So using these hyperlinks to interlink content is actually a good SEO strategy as well, especially if you're hyperlinking keywords. And I know this is like a rapid fire spin through this, so I appreciate you guys sticking with me. Okay, another way to make sure you're writing killer web copy is to consider image alt text. So when you upload images to your website pages, to your blogs, when you upload them, there's going to be a field for a description and image alt text. So there's two reasons why you want to actually think about what goes into those fields. The one is accessibility. So visually impaired users using screen readers will actually be read an alt attribute to better understand the on-page image. So they won't see the image, they'll see the alt text. So you want to make sure it's descriptive of the image. And then alt text provides better image context or descriptions to search engines, helping them index an image properly. So the exact same thing, that image alt text is telling Google what that image and that page is about so that it can index it correctly. So instead of it just saying like screenshot or Nancy headshot 1, think about the alt text in a way that it's descriptive of what the image is and the page is the spirit of the page. Okay. So in summary on SEO, do some keyword research, know what kinds of keywords people are looking to find your product or service. If you're doing custom cakes, do some keyword research to know that maybe actually in your area people are using occasion cakes, or they're using birthday cakes, or they're using other words. If you know that, you can make sure that those words are included, whether it's as their own individual pages, whether it's in the copy itself, whether it's in the headers. Those are decisions you can make, but at least you'll be making them by knowing what people are looking for. Always write for value first and SEO second. So again, you're always writing for audience value. How do I make this feel really valuable for them? And then when you go back, again, this is step 5, when you go back to look at it, you're thinking, do I have my SEO keywords in here? Do I have enough of the right keywords here? Am I using headers effectively? Create a lot of content, ongoing, valuable, consistent content. And if you don't believe me on this one, do some Googling in and around your competitors. Google both the service of like business consulting, but then also Google some of the questions that you know that your potential clients or customers have, and see what comes up. And you'll see that content is the best answers to questions more than it's the best. Well, if you search business consulting, you're going to get IBM, KPMG, like you're going to get those. So maybe don't, you know what I'm trying to say. Like, aside from these like big companies that own the world, if you search for occasion cakes, you're going to get the best content. And then if you search for questions in and around, how long does it take? What questions do I need to know? See what's there, and make sure your content is as good or better, answering those questions in only the way you can. That's the key to SEO. Use those headers. Use those headers. Get your SEO keywords into those headers, but also they're such heavy hitters, they're such ambassadors for your brand voice. I would say also use those headers to add in personality, to add in a bit of a joke, to add in that bit of pizzazz. And experiment. Okay, so one of the best parts about web copy is that there's so many ways to measure and analyze and see what's working and not. So I would say experiment with some A/B tests and things. I'm just running short. I'm just going to switch gears a little bit because I wanted to show you a couple of things before we leave. This is the Culture Talk website. So if you go to culturetalk.com and you go to archetypes, this is where you'll be able to kind of explore the different archetypes and what they say. And then again, just think about if does this sound like your brand or not. That's that website if you want to take a look at it.